All right, thank you again for coming to Wednesday workshops in the Center for Political Studies. Today, we have a visitor, Dante King, who is going to talk about a project of his that is both substantive, but also involves the assembly of data. And he wants to talk about his data collection as well as some of the ways that he's been using the data. So please join me in welcoming Dante. I'm going to walk over.
Well, thank you. Thank you for that introduction, and thank you for having me here today. Thank you all for coming. It's always nice to visit the school down the road or whatever euphemism we're using for that these days. It's a pleasure to be here. I want to talk to you a little bit today about the American Communities Project, which I run. It's based up in East Lansing. I actually live in DC, but I come to East Lansing once a month and spend a week there, work with students and work on the project. I'm always working on the project, but I work sometimes in East Lansing. The project is really a mix of a couple things. It's part journalism, it's part sociology, it's part poli-sci, I guess is the way I describe it. And we use it to try to understand how the country's fragmented. We call what's happening fragmentation of the American electorate, American culture, a lot of different parts of the country. I myself am a journalist. So I'm just a stupid journalist. I'm not a big academic. I've been a journalist for more than 30 years now. So I've been a journalist at a lot of different places. I worked at Newsweek a long time ago, back when that actually meant something. Worked for the Christian Science Monitor. I worked for the Wall Street Journal for a dozen or so years, and I worked for the Meet the Press at NBC News. And almost all the work I've done has really been based on this idea of trying to understand voters, who they are, what they think, and why they think what they think. And that's really what the project is. It's a combination of using data and old-fashioned going out on the street and talking to people, doing shoe leather reporting, as it's sometimes called, to try to understand why the country feels like it's kind of falling apart. So what I want to do is walk through the project. I want to talk about why we started doing it, why we do what we do, how it works, and then run through some of the data. There's a lot of data. It's all going to come here, actually. Some of it's here now, or will come. 3 big surveys we've done over 3 years. There we go. Okay. I want to talk a little bit about data and how journalism, I think, has gotten better with data overall. I think it's actually one of the good things that's happened in journalism. There aren't a lot of them. But the one problem with the national data that we all recite and the national news media is it masks all subtlety and nuance. So we talk about things like unemployment or earnings or life expectancy, and there are national figures for all that. When you get inside, you find all sorts of differences. You find differences, obviously, based on race and ethnicity. You find differences based on educational attainment. And you find differences even based on geography. We know that. Journalists know that. So we try to find ways to get around it. And we use crosstabs, right? We do big surveys. We do polls. They're not really surveys. Most media polls are like 1,000 people, which can work. But we try to make sense of it by coming up with these terms like, soccer mom or NASCAR dad, or we look at Catholic vote or LGBTQ vote. And we're trying to understand how these different parts of the electorate work. I've done this. I've written a lot of stories this way. There's good stuff in here. You can write good stories this way. But the one thing that I think is like stuff that's just tabular data, and you're talking about different kinds of people, the people who are already abstractions from the data still remain abstractions. And what I mean by that is this like 30 to 40-year-old college educated white woman looks the same in the data as this 30 to 40-year-old college educated white woman. And I'm going to tell you right now that they're different people. I've interviewed these people. They're different. And they're different for a bunch of reasons. Some of the reason is the person who chooses to live in a city and the person, if they're making the choice, the person who chooses to live in a city and the person who chooses to live in the rural area are fundamentally different people. You're making different choices about what you want. And then those choices are compounded by the fact that your life, your lived experience, who do you see every day? How much time do you spend in a car? What do you do for a living? What do you do for fun and entertainment? How do you keep yourself? They're different for these two people. And the truth behind all this stuff, we think, is that place matters more than ever, and geography matters more than ever. And we think that's true for 3 big reasons. One is we are self-segregating. The people who can, not everybody can afford, not everybody chooses where they want to live. Stuck where they are. But the people who can choose where they want to live are increasingly living around like-minded people. It's kind of a split that's happening in society. Niche marketing and micro-targeting understands those differences and targets different messages to those people and really different ideas about what's happening in the world. And then digital and social media have really created infinite channels for news consumption. I think there was this feeling initially with the rise of the internet and the web that geography wasn't going to matter anymore. That you could just, the most liberal person in America could live in rural Nebraska and just read the New York Times and watch MS, whatever we call it now, MS Now, and Mother Jones. That person very well may exist. That may be a true thing. But the fact of the matter is that person's really an outlier. When you go visit these communities, then the people these people talk to, the communication they have, and the news they consume leads to a different kind of view of the world. And it's really because of these three things we've done. And the result is that we don't just live in different communities, we live in different realities. And I want to kind of highlight this point by talking about where we are right now in Southeast Michigan. Washtenaw and Wayne County, I'm sure you know, sit right next door to each other. And if you look at them on election night, they just look like a blue blob, right? Blue corner of the state down here. Throw in Oakland too, if you want. And, you know, you look at the 2024 presidential results, they both went heavily for Kamala Harris. But then you get below that and you see how different these numbers are. Both these counties have been voting for a Democrat in every presidential election back to 1988. But you look at the demographics, $30,000 difference in terms of median household income, almost 30 points difference in terms of bachelor degrees. Wayne is technically, I guess, one way of thinking about it, more diverse, smaller white, non-Hispanic population, larger Black population, but then even look at the Asian population is larger in Washtenaw. These are complicated places, and even though they look the same on the map, they're very, very different. That's the kind of stuff we're trying to capture. I think even going further with Wayne and Washtenaw, the really interesting thing is when you get past 1988, they look really different. Wayne has voted solidly Democratic for a very, very long time. Washtenaw, when you go between 1684, just was definition of a swing county. RD, 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 depending on the election and who the candidates were. What's this about? When you even look at it this way, that change from here, where they've all been voting the same, so these counties have both been voting the same since 1988 to here, this is a story about how politics changed in America. And it's a story about how these two places are different. The rise of college-educated white voters in particular becoming a backbone of the Democratic Party is about how Washtenaw has really fallen over and becoming not just Democratic in terms of the presidential vote, but more Democratic than Wayne, which is kind of fascinating to think about. It would have been kind of shocking, I think, back in, obviously, 1984. So what we want to do with the work we do is merge these two ideas, merge the ideas of demographics and place to try to understand different kinds of place in America and how they see the world differently. How did we do this? We took 36 different data points across the 3,141 counties, roughly 3,100 counties in the United States. And these are some of the points we used, all the racial and ethnic groups that we can get, percent married, percent in military, educational attainments in there, percent in college, family size, housing values, even occupation. Do you work in manufacturing, work in service? We took all those data, threw it into a massive spreadsheet, used them measuring all these data points in all the 3,100 counties using standard deviations against the mean, and then used a k-means cluster to sort them into different types of place, different types of community. And to be clear, I did not do this. I am just a stupid journalist, but I work with an academic who did this for me and helped me do the work. And when we do all that, this is the country as I see it. This is 15 different types of community mapped across the country. And you realize when you look at it, some things jump out. First of all, there are some swaths of the country that are all the same color. There are still regional variations. Like if you look at that kind of teal that runs from New York across the Midwest to the bottom of Michigan up to Minnesota, that's definitely like a type of place. You see that kind of turquoise across the bottom of the country, that's a type of place. The purple that runs through Kentucky, the green that runs through what's traditionally thought of as, I guess, the Black Belt, the southern part of the country. But then you notice some other things when you look at this map too. There are areas that pop that aren't regional at all. There are these clusters of kind of pink surrounded by yellow and orange. That, when you look at it, is really the rise of a more, they're not all the same, but more of a common kind of metropolitan culture in the United States. When you look at the country this way, and when I look at results, when I look at demographics, the point is that suburban Atlanta has a hell of a lot more in common with suburban Chicago than it does the rest of Georgia, right? That kind of commonplace has risen as a kind of community in America. And it's not to say that Oakland County is exactly the same as down in Gwinnett or Cobb down in Atlanta. They share a lot of common tendencies. This is what the map looks like. Colored in. This is what the types are. So let's see what times have. We can toggle back and forth a little bit along here. These are the 15 types that we look at. The number of counties on the left side. Is it the left side? It is. I'm looking backwards. And total population on the right side. You can see when you look at this, the point is to not have these all be equal, right? We want the data to tell us where the common places are. So there are only 48 big cities, but they hold 81 million people, right? And there are 628 counties in what we call rural middle America. They only hold 24. Really quickly to go through these. That green, that is the Black Belt, that's the African American South. That purple region running through there, that is what we call the evangelical hubs. That teal that runs across the top of the country, including Michigan, is what we call rural middle America. That turquoise down the bottom of the country is what we call Hispanic centers. You see, though, it's largely along Texas, comes up though to Kansas, and comes up. You see random pops in certain places also around the country, not out in California. I'm going to do my joke about Utah. You see Utah, those are what we call the LDS enclaves. And you see they're heavily based in Utah and right around Utah. People always ask me, why did the Mormons get their own type? And my answer is that they were chosen. The real reason the Mormons have their own type is because they're fundamentally different than each other. So they have a lot in common with all the evangelical hubs. We had to break them out in an earlier iteration of this we did, because we found that just to talk about these community differences, they're both socially conservative, they're both heavily religious, these two types of places. But when you get to these evangelical hubs, you really have lots of religious people in lots of small churches with lots of church leaders. So it's a lot of tribes with a lot of little chiefs running the different kinds of community. When you get those LDS communities, everybody's a Mormon. It's fascinating. Like everybody in the city council is a Mormon. Like, and they're all going to church. They're literally going to the same churches in the morning and hanging out together. Creates a different kind of environment. The pink on the map is what we call the big cities. There's two different yellows. I'm sorry, when you have 15 colors, you run into problems. This yellow that's down here, is that working on the screen? Yeah. This yellow that's down here, these are Native American lands. You see them up here and up here. This kind of more golden is what we call exurbs. The pink is the big cities. The red is college towns. We're in one right now. Orange is what we call the urban suburbs. And let me see what else. We have middle suburbs, which is this kind of light green around some of these communities. It's kind of what you think of as like blue collar suburban communities. Wayne County, or not Wayne County, but Macomb County, Monroe County, Genesee County. Any ones that I've missed? Oh, the Native American lands. Oh, and that maroon running through the middle of the country, Aging Farmlands, all through here. And this dark blue is what we call graying America. There are some overlap between these types, but when you crunch all the data and you do a k-means cluster, they break out into different things. We also have ones just for military communities, like around here. These are called military posts. Those places are really fascinating because you have often fairly rural communities with people who live in the military, work for the military, and they are actually surprisingly really tuned into international. Okay, so that runs through all the types. What are we doing? Well, we are funded by Robert Wood Johnson for 3 years to try to understand what we call American fragmentation. And there are two parts to that, really. One, we have done 3 big surveys. We ask people questions and we gather data and we produce a lot of charts and graphs and talk about what the data show us. The second part of that, because this is all geographic, right? We have places we can go. We look at what's interesting in the findings, and then we can say, there's something interesting going on there in the African American South. And there's something interesting in here going on in the exurbs. We need to go visit one of those places. And you go and you test what you see in the data to see if it supports what you hear when you talk to people on the ground. And I think even more important, you get to ask them why, because you can't get in that survey. Survey will tell you what people think, won't tell you why. Going out and talking to a bunch of people will let you see some of what's behind what you're getting on the survey results. So we've been doing this for 3 years. I know these are data people, so let's talk a little about the survey work. Okay. To do the survey work, we partnered with Ipsos on this 3-year grant. We used their knowledge panel for most of this. I'll explain. It was a little complicated the way we had to put the surveys, the samples together. Surveys were constructed after we had conversations with a panel of experts, people in poli-sci, sociology. We had some journalists on there. We got people from the left and right, as much as we could. The right's a complicated place right now. And we talked to some journalists. The surveys show how we did the sample were a mix of the probability panel, the knowledge panel that Ipsos has, and then random digit dial. Why did we have to do that? We had to do that because some of these places are so sparsely populated that there's just not enough panel. So really quickly, this is what our sample looks like for this year in particular, but we have one for each year. So you see, generally we're getting at least 300 interviews in each place. In some we get more, like in the big cities, we got 500, urban suburbs, we also got more than 400. That's because those places are big and kind of complex and diverse, and we wanted to get more in them. I know it's not a lot to say 400 to 500. It's not a ton of people, but we only have so much money. And this allows us to do at least some breakdowns within to try to understand what's going on with different groups within those types. And then obviously random digit dial in the Aging Farmlands and Native American lands. Okay, so that's enough wind up. Let's talk a little bit about some of the stuff we found. We asked people a whole host of questions. I'm not going to go into all of them here. The data will be here, but I'm going to run through some highlights in some of the data. We found this to be really interesting. All 3 years, we gave people a long list of topics and asked them, what are the top 3 issues for your community? And what are the top 3 issues for the country? All 3 years, nationally and locally, inflation was the #1 topic. Inflation, and it wasn't close. It was far and away the #1 topic in almost all these places. But what gets interesting after that, everybody was obviously concerned about inflation. Big takeaway, probably just not a massive surprise. But when you get below 1, the numbers get really interesting. So look at the differences in the second most popular, the second most important issue, the third most important issue. 2, 3, 4, and 5 get very different in these places. Some stuff that's really interesting here. Crime or gun violence, which is #2 in the African American South, was #2 all 3 years we did this survey, which is something we're going to go explore in the next couple of weeks. We're going to go down to South Carolina and dig into that topic a little bit. Homelessness and housing insecurity, also big issue in big cities and college towns. College town thing was at first a little surprising to us, but then I thought about it, kind of made sense. And I'm sure you're running into it here in Ann Arbor. They see it in East Lansing, they see it in Charlottesville, see it all over. The interesting thing in here that you will notice, this is the top issue locally. Immigration is fourth in terms of the national average, and is not above 4th in any single. It just doesn't rate as high. So people may say immigration is a big issue nationally, but if you talk about what's affecting them in their lives, where they live, it doesn't really rate very high. I mean, I guess you could say it's in the, in a lot of places in the top 4, but it's below a lot of other things, including healthcare. We love this because it does 2 things. First of all, it shows how dominant inflation is in terms of what's driving the political agenda in this country and how people are voting. And then it shows that once you get below that, all the differences that we see in the data start to emerge. We find that fascinating. I will just say we're going to come back to this in a second. Taxes. I honestly think when people say taxes, they just don't know what to say. I don't think it means a whole hell of a lot. I mean, everybody thinks taxes are a problem. It's fine. But the other things, healthcare, things like homelessness and housing. The other thing that's fascinating in here, look, opioids, #2 in the evangelical hubs, #2 in working class country. This ties in with a lot of we've heard about deaths of despair. These are the communities where people, they're working manual labor jobs. Maybe they had some aches and pains. They started taking opioids for it, got hooked on it. That's the kind of stuff we're seeing in here. That is emerged as a consistent problem. Yeah.
Can I ask a couple of clarifying questions?
Sure, please.
The survey and then the interviews, and what are the sample sizes by the 16 types? Just the interviews, or was that the survey that's then augmented by a smaller set of interviews?
So when you get back to this is the number of interviews we did on the survey. So this is for the first 13 of here down to working class country. These are the panel respondents in these communities, right? These aren't what we did when we talked to people. No, we're 2 people.
Do you have those numbers?
That we talked to personally? No, I mean, that is the part of this that's strictly journalism. We go out and talk to people, we record interviews, we actually write long stories about that. We record video and audio. Last year, we tried to do it all through video. We took a different tack on last year's survey, following Trump's election and the kind of tumult that Trump was creating. We thought we needed to focus on that. We really made that the focus of the work. And we went and talked to people in college towns and military posts about the impacts of the Trump administration. And it was interesting because those community types are really fascinating because they're the populations in them do tend to be transient for both, right? In some ways, a military post is like a college town without college. And the college that you've got differences, so it's a lot of young people that are moving through, but dealing with different kinds of issues.
A clarifying question on the other graph. Did the respondents rank order all 16 categories?
What's that?
Rank order all 16.
Yeah. So some just weren't big enough. Some weren't big enough. What we asked them on this question was, give us your top three. Here's a list of all the topics. Give us your top three. And then we did percentages to figure out what was 1, 2, 3, and 4, and so on. Yeah, no problem.
I also asked a similar qualifying question, going back to the sample slide. This is essentially a stratified sample where you're trying to get an equal draw from each of your categories.
Trying, yeah.
And you're doing pretty well. I mean, in terms of getting an equal draw.
Right. More in some places deliberately. Yeah.
But it also implies that you can't, except under very rigorous statistical conditions, you can't produce a national estimate.
So we did do that. We pulled a national estimate out of these two. So these were weighted. We know what the demographics are of all these types. So we made sure that the responses we were getting corresponded to the demographics of what the types were. And then out of these massive sample, this sample of, well, it's not massive, but it's massive for us, 5,400 people, they created a sample that was a national sample that met all the criteria for hitting the national.
So just going to ask another question.
No, please. I'm here.
When you say they created a sample to represent the nation, did they subset the interviews according to the national demographics? Did they reweight the data based upon what they knew about the response?
They did the form. They went through the sample. The sample is big enough where so Ipsos does a lot of like media work.
Right.
So they could do this, and the sample we had of 5,400 is big enough where they could say we can take this with what we have and we can create a national sample out of it. They might have done some weighting too. That's a good question.
No, but so are you going to report national data?
Yes, we do have them. Yeah, we have national data on all these questions.
No, I mean in your presentation.
You have them on? So yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I'll show you on some things.
And when you do that, about what size would that sample be?
That's a really good question for them. It's it's enough where you get over 1,000. I mean, it's a little, I think it's a little more like a media.
Yeah, okay, that's fine.
Okay, onward. So this is what this is this year's data. This is the 2025 or last year's data, 2025 sample about the most important issues. This is something we did that was interesting. We looked at the number 2 issue over time because I said inflation was number 1 across all these communities across all 3 years. But we wanted to see if number 2 moved. And the thing we thought was really interesting here was in some places you really do see a static number 2 issue where it clearly is. They view it as a real problem in the community. Again, African American South, crime or gun violence, opioids and drug addiction, the evangelical hubs and working class country, homelessness, housing insecurity in military posts, along with Hispanic centers, college towns, big cities. It's interesting that 2023 crime or gun violence we're coming out of COVID, and that's still the memories of the kind of the violent spike that happened during COVID. But then other places you see the number that it changes. Let's look at graying America. It's opioids and drug addiction 1 year, taxes another year, healthcare another year. When we look at this, or you look at excerpts, the fact that it's taxes all like 3 years, the excerpts is kind of funny. The excerpts are pretty conservative. They're kind of the mirror image of the urban suburbs. They're well educated, above the national average, higher incomes, but very conservative. not as conservative as like the evangelical communities, but pretty conservative. So the fact that taxes would rate so high every year is pretty funny, though you see even with the urban suburbs are pretty high. We like looking at this to just try to track change. We're going to come back to change in a second, actually. Another finding we had, this is from the 2024 data, this is talking about, are you hopeful for the future? And the thing we thought was very interesting in this was, first of all, everybody's hopeful about their personal future. Are you hopeful about your personal future? Are you hopeful for the future of your community? Are you hopeful for the next children, next generation? And every time you get a little further away from the person, the number drops until you get to the United States, and then the number is quite a bit lower, right? Short-term future and long-term future numbers are much lower than they are for your personal future across all these types. So we were curious about this because if everybody says their personal future is looking pretty good, but the future of the United States looks pretty bad, and we know these places view everything very differently. They view what they want out of the United States very differently. Why would it look this way? So to explore this, actually, we went to New York and we did some of these interviews. And we went to New York City, we went to Manhattan, and then we went to Chenango County, which is this county. It's really kind of north and west of New York. It's really in the middle of nowhere. It's pretty isolated. And we asked them the same questions. Are you hopeful for yourself? Are you hopeful for your community? Are you hopeful for the United States over the next couple of years? And then the numbers matched. I mean, even in Chenango County, where people have a really hard time, they were pretty hopeful. Some people are having a really hard time. They were pretty hopeful about their future. We took this to mean that there is a certain amount of hopefulness about the future because you have agency. Something you can control, or you think you can control. You can't, but you think you can control about the future of the States. But the future of the United States number was really interesting because New York City, Manhattan, which, you know, Donald Trump won, or Donald Trump lost, or Kamala Harris won by like almost 63 points, I think, in the last election. Chenango County, Donald Trump won it by almost 30. They're really different places. They're really different places, and neither of them are hopeful about the future. And you might think, well, is this about the fact that they're just upset about the fact that the country is at odds with each other and things are tense? No, it's not. People in Chenango County, we asked this question in 2024 before the election. We're upset about the short-term future and the long-term future of the United States because Donald Trump wasn't president. And in Manhattan, they were worried about the short-term and long-term future of the United States because Donald Trump could come back, which was kind of fascinating. The power that Trump has made everybody kind of nervous about what the future was going to look like nationally. We asked this question again, the series of questions again in 2025, and the numbers look different. This is, are you hopeful for the next few years of the United States? Each one of these community types and what their answer was in 2024 versus what their answer was in 2025. As you can see, the total goes up a little bit, hopeful for the future. That's really being driven by the fact that these communities that voted for Trump, Aging Farmlands, the evangelical lefts, in fact, all of these, the excerpts, Graying America stayed the same, kind of interesting. LES, these communities all voted for Donald Trump, and they saw big jumps in hope for the future for the country. Conversely, communities that did not vote for Donald Trump felt that the drops aren't as dramatic, but less hopeful about the future. There is, however, one group in here that we think is particularly interesting, and that is the Hispanic centers that actually voted for Donald Trump. Those communities voted for Donald Trump by about 10 points.
When specifically did the survey run in 2020?
We did this in August. So we've had, the reason why we think it's particularly interesting with the Hispanic centers is, like, Trump's done a lot of stuff. And we're feeling the effects of a lot of things differently. But the one thing that I think was immediate was the videos and the stories about what's happening with immigration. This is obviously pre-predicted in Minneapolis, right? But the idea that this was something that people saw immediately. The Hispanic centers voted for Trump by 10 points, and yet they felt less hopeful about the future. We thought that was interesting in that obviously, you know, people in this community feel they're maybe under threat. They're still about 50%. Those communities, to be clear, does not mean they're majority Hispanic. It just means the Hispanic population is much higher than the national average, right? They're still very divided. Same with the African South, by the way. But we think this is particularly interesting because Trump's put a lot of things in motion. But the Hispanic centers and what's happened in immigration, people felt this first. And this is the community that Trump won by 10 points. It was a pretty remarkable swing. Biden won them by, like, I want to say 2 or 3 or 3 or 4 in 2020, and they swung heavily to Trump. And then you see this number fall. We're wondering, and this is something we'd like to ask in 2026, as some of the other things that Trump has implemented, the impacts of them start to become more clear, will these numbers reverse? in some of these communities, particularly the aging farmlands. We did this survey in August. So a lot of the stuff that Trump had done with tariffs and the responses from China about not buying soybeans and other products and kind of hitting farmers where they live really wasn't being felt yet. A lot of them were like, well, it'll probably straighten itself out. By the time we talked to people in fall, some farmers we talked to, they were deeply concerned about where things were headed. In Gove County, Kansas, I talked to a farmer who said that a lot of the farmers around him could not buy seed for the next year because they hadn't sold their crops enough. You sell enough and then you buy the seed, plant next year's crop. He was wondering where it was all going to lead. We wonder if we ask this question again next year, will that number come down a little bit? I suspect it will. I don't think it's going to collapse. These places are culturally very conservative, but my guess is it will come down. Other places that might be interesting are the middle suburbs, which are, again, that's Macomb County. It's where I grew up. Those are blue collar folks. And Trump has promised them their manufacturing jobs are coming back. They haven't yet. There's a good reason to believe they're probably not going to come back anytime soon. So I'm curious to see if those numbers start ticking backward. Those middle suburbs voted for Trump in all three elections, but by varying degrees, right? The margin he won them by in 2024 was quite large. It was 14 to 15 points. They could definitely, there are places to watch, we think, this fall, because those are kind of swing counties in a lot of places, particularly in Michigan. You think of what would happen in Monroe and Macomb. Even if they don't go for the Democrat, you see Republican margins shrink, could have a real impact on the vote because there's a lot of people in those places. They're pretty densely populated.
Can I just interject real quick? So I'm fascinated by the Hispanic number, but I do wonder that, when you go in the field to interview these folks that you don't let confirmation bias sort of get in the way, which is like, do you think immigration is the story? But I think that and you saw this a little bit in the ranked choice order, right? Like immigration wasn't even in the top 3.
Right.
And so I think that these folks are probably the most sort of fair weather Trump supporters. And like, the fact that the economic stuff hasn't improved, I think might be a big part of this story.
Completely true. I completely agree with you, especially like we know from looking the inflation. Look, places who live closer to the margins, places where people live closer to the margins are going to be hit a lot harder by it. That's just that shows the data we find. So some of this may be that. The only reason we tend to pin this particularly on an immigration was like August. I mean, maybe there were already signs that inflation was, inflation. People overdrive it. It is possible that people in the Hispanic centers really thought that prices were going to come down, which was just like that wasn't going to happen. Like that's not taming inflation means prices rise more slowly. That wasn't what Trump promised people, right? So it could be that. And you might be right. There might be some confirmation bias in there. It's something we'd like to go see. We work with we don't just go out in the field. We work with freelance journalists because there's only 2 of us. Myself and Ari Pincus, my colleague she moves up to Philadelphia. But we'd like to go out and see that. We did last year send we worked with Ray Suarez, a friend of mine. We sent him down to talk to the Hispanic centers along the Texas border. He came back with some really fascinating stories. Because those places in particular swung very heavily to Donald Trump. And the stuff he heard down there, and this was earlier in the year, this was before the survey actually, because we were just curious. Why don't you go and talk to folks? The stuff he was hearing down there was people liked the order. They actually did like the order, but they didn't. Even the early signs were like, some of the quotes he got were like, well, why do they have to be so mean about it? Like, there's no reason to do it the way they're doing it. And again, that's really early. Like going back to those places now, I'd be fascinated. So,
Does the chart show, want to make sure I'm reading this correct,
sure.
that for Hispanic centers, there's a 4 percentage point decline
That is right.
in hopefuls.
Yep.
So these data were collected 6 months ago,
Yes.
which could be, I don't know whether you know this, could be related to activities at the border,
Definitely.
but it's pre-ice.
Yes.
So for a slightly adjusted time period, the decline could be even greater when you.
Completely agree. So the one thing we're asking, Sorry, no, that's not what I mean. What I'm trying to say is, our grant runs out, this grant runs out in May. Robert Wood Johnson's already asked us, they came to us in the fall and said they wanted another proposal and told us to think big. So that's their problem. They asked for it. So we gave them a big proposal. They have told us, if they're listening, hello. They have told us that they're interested in funding us again. We haven't yet figured out, length of time. We asked for like 5 years. I don't know if they're gonna give, that's a lot for them. But the one thing we were trying to figure out is how to do the survey work, because our concern about the survey work is in election years. We did this big survey in 2024, and it was it wasn't right before the election, but we released it the fall before the election, and then Trump gets elected, right? And you immediately ask yourself, well, is there any value to any of the stuff we did right now? Because everything's been turned on its head. So our thought was, if we do survey work going forward, what we'd like to do is do big surveys like what we did here. This is, this big survey with a lot of questions in it in odd numbered years. And then in years with elections, are there ways we can do something lighter and quicker and multiple times during the year, ask just a few questions and just get some stuff we can build some trend data off, and then in the odd number of years come back and do the big kind of omnibus, like let's look at everything kind of survey.
You don't have data for 22.
No,
The
we weren't going yet.
You could be subject to a midterm effect, but you don't have any comparison to 22.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Well, I just like the problem with survey data in election year is like, I mean, look, we're doing a lot of stuff, but we do like people to look at what we're doing. Yeah, nice. And problem is in election year, it's like, what's the Trump number? It's just like, that's not what we're doing, and that's what everybody wants. So that's why we thought even numbered years, just try to do small things where we can try to do this directional stuff in the odd numbered years. Instead of viewing it as like something that sets a stage for the election, do it after the election, after big elections, and say like, okay, how we all feeling, right? How we all feeling about things. That's the plan. We'll see how Robert Wood Johnson feels. Again, if you're listening, we'd really like to do this. Okay. This is something else I wanted to put in here because I think it reveals something about how different these types are. We did ask in this last survey on all these issues: inflation, tariffs, infectious disease outbreaks, higher education, vaccine availability, K-12 education, immigration. Have you noticed changes in the last few months, and have those changes been positive or negative? Right. So we did this survey in August. This is out of people who notice changes. Out of people who notice changes, again, first of all, everybody who noticed changes on inflation or prices thought things were getting worse. And every one of these community types, doesn't matter if they voted for Trump or not, right? And tariffs also. You know, if really I mean, how do people really feel tariffs? I don't know. It may be related more directly to inflation. They view it as another way of looking at inflation. But then look when you get to the bottom on immigration, right? Because as you go down through this, you get less and less, fewer and fewer people saying that they view things negatively. Immigration, 51% think it's negative, but you get to the evangelical hubs, only 39% think the changes in immigration have been negative. Native American lands, only 36%, 35% working class country. Then you look at the big cities, it's 64% that think the change has been negative. This is where we start to see the real differences in these kinds of communities. And it's, frankly, it's satisfying in your work to see sometimes it's nice to see the things where everybody agrees, which we think are most interesting. But when you do see the differences, we feel like, okay, we're capturing something here that's wrong, foul. I wanted to include this because we did ask people a series of questions that are really trying to understand cultural divides, just how they feel about these things, either agree or disagree questions. And I put a bunch on here that had the highest difference in the different community types we looked at. So, questions like when jobs are scarce, people should prioritize hiring people of this country over immigrants. Nationally, that number is 52%, but 63% in the evangelical hubs, only 43% in the Hispanic centers, a difference of 20 points. That's how you read this chart going down. Get down to the bottom one. Faith and religion are important parts of American life. 56% of Americans say that's true, but 79% in the aging farmlands and only 45% in the urban suburbs. So a difference of 34 points. Again, capturing with these different kinds of communities, how differently they see the world. We think the series of questions is interesting because there's a big question, obviously, of what's driving the country. Are things primarily economic or issue, or is it cultural? We view a lot of these questions like America is in decline. These are cultural, like just how do you view the country? And we think we capture a lot with these. We're going to keep asking these questions. One area of agreement that was pretty interesting on the survey this year, we did ask people, immigrants who have entered the U.S. illegally, or this is agree, disagree. enter the country illegally been working here as members of the community for the last 10 years, should they be given a pathway to citizenship? Every one of the community types we talked to, people agreed with this. It wasn't quite, it's only in working class country, and in the evangelical hubs, it's only a plurality, 49%, you don't get over 50, but it's still, when you look at the disagree number, it's 20 points high. Like, when you look at something like this, you start to look at, and you question what's going on with the immigration policy in this country. It does raise questions about, whether the Trump White House is reading things correctly and how people really feel about what they're doing with immigration right now. We thought the agreement on this was really fascinating, an issue that's pretty damn divisive right now. Another area of agreement, really quickly, feelings about AI. We did have some questions about AI in the survey. And this was striking the agreement that everybody thinks that AI needs more regulation right now. Every community type. There's a lot of, I guess AI people would say there's a lot of unfounded fear. People who don't like AI would say, see, he likes AI. It's something that's interesting, and I expect to see this come up as an issue, maybe a little bit, maybe not in the fall, maybe in the fall, but I think in the next Congress, as AI kind of grows in terms of its power and how it's going to affect even workplaces. We're seeing some interesting stuff with employment right now that might be attributable to AI. We obviously do the survey work, but any census data or labor data that's released at the county level, we can push it through this filter and see it differently. We've seen some really interesting stuff with unemployment over the past year, where urban suburbs, which tend to be wealthier and better educated than most other communities, have seen drops in employment. Not just increases in unemployment, like fewer jobs, fewer people working. And that's strange because we're not in a recession. Generally, when we have hard economic times in this country, we kind of watch it climb through these types. It tends to hit rural communities first, and people who are less insulated first. Urban suburbs, they tend to be pretty well insulated from those changes. And the fact that they're feeling the changes first makes us wonder. I'm not saying it's about AI, but it's curious. And it's something for us to keep an eye on. Okay. What happened in the election really quickly? So these are not survey data. These are actually election results. And I put this slide on here because there's a lot of question about what actually happened in 2024. And I think when we look at the data through the types, we think we have a pretty good answer for this. The question of Republicans would look at this. What you see on this is 2016 margin in each one of these types, Democratic or Republican, what they won by, this presidential race. 2020 margin, Democratic, Republican candidate, what they won by, and then 2024. And then the first column, the first yellow column is the 16 to 20 change, and the second yellow column is the 20 to 24 change. The thing that's truly interesting on here is the 16 to 20 change. Joe Biden ended up winning the 2020 election by about 5 points. It wasn't like a massive win, but it was decent sized win in terms of the popular vote. And yet still, when you look at this, the places that voted for Trump did see an increase in the Trump margin, right? Like Trump's margin improved in the aging farmlands, it improved in the evangelical hubs, it improved in the Hispanic centers, it improved in the LDS enclaves. It even improved a tiny bit, that's 0.8, by the way, in the big cities, 0.8. So even in an election where the incumbent loses and the Democrat wins, there are still places where Trump's margin improved. 2024, a race that Trump wins by 1.5 percentage points, a little less in terms of the popular vote, he improved his margins every single one of these communities, including places that voted for Trump. And including places that voted for Kamala Harris. That's kind of surprising to us. And look, when you see something like this, when we see movement, these places are so different. When we see movement all in one direction like this, something's going on. And the question when you see movement like this, or is this a candidate or is this an issue, I think is the main way that I look at it. It's hard to see. If you were to see movement like this and there was a transformational candidate, like a candidate who's really taken hold of the country and moved it in a direction, that's kind of what this would look like. But Trump only won by 1.5 points. So that's not what's going on here, I don't think. What else do we know? What could it be? To us, the greatest argument for these data is that this is inflation coming home to roost. Now, obviously, there are different issues in different places. There were people that just didn't like Biden. Maybe the Democrats were tired, they'd had it with him. He was too old for the job. But to us, this feels like inflation. This feels like an issue. This was an issue election, really driven by economics. We do have one extra bit of evidence for that point of view. We work with AP. AP does this massive survey every year called VoteCast after elections. They have our typology, so we can get all the AP VoteCast data through the typology. We can understand, not just, we don't need it for the vote because we can actually get the vote, but like on these issue questions and questions of why people voted the way they did. Every one of the community types, the number one issue was the economy and jobs. And I guess people would say like, well, so what? It's an election. That's always the case. True. And immigration was the number two issue in most of these, I think all of the community types, most or all, but it was quite a bit lower. This election was really the 2024 election, and Trump's election is his return to the White House. It honestly just looks like it's about the economy to us and about inflation. And I think that's something to keep in mind as 2026 rolls along. The last survey was 2025. Trump had been in office for 8 months, 7.5 months, and people were still upset about inflation. That is something that tells you the voters are still going to be in a pretty foul mood, probably in the fall, unless something suddenly change. Seems unlikely. Yeah.
Could you get these AP poll numbers through the typology for prior presidential elections?
I think we have it going back. I think we have it for 2020. I mean, it's so one of the new, I will say like, the new grant proposal that we have with RWJF, one thing we have in there is we have AP as a partner. And we would like them to start using this typology in the reporting, and we'd fund some of it. But they are going to work, they used to work with NORC to do this work. They're going to be working with SSRS going forward. And SSRS, Chris Jackson, who was at Ipsos, who was our partner on this, has gone over to SSRS. So we will have it going forward. We'll have it for 2026 and 2028.
The NORC VoteCast data are archived at the Roper Center.
Yes.
In theory, somebody could get a copy of the data.
And just run it through the typology. Yeah, absolutely. Anybody? That sounds like the work for academics, not journals.
There's another interpretation of what happened in 2024 election.
Yeah.
Which was that Kamala Harris got 5 million less votes than Joe
Absolutely
Biden.
true. Absolutely true.
So the shift towards Donald Trump is obvious.
Yeah.
The explanation, I think, is complicated.
Yes.
There probably is some issue-based component to it, but there's a mobilization.
Yeah.
issue as well.
I think that's true. And I think that obviously, a lot of it was, Harris was dealt a very bad hand. If Biden had stepped out after 2022, do I think Harris would have been the nominee? Probably not, actually.
Yeah.
And I think a Democrat would have been well served. This is where the issue and the candidate would have come together. I think the Democrat who got the nomination, who wasn't Joe Biden, would have been able to, or wasn't Kamala, more easily from Biden and also from the inflation. Like the inflation thing hung around Harris's neck as well. She had to deal with it too. But I agree. And she's far from perfect. And a lot of people stayed home. Right. A lot of Democrats stayed home for different reasons. And I'm done. Two things I want to say. What do we think this all means? I think there are two big takeaways. When we originally got this grant, this is the 3-year grant, and there were supposed to be 3 surveys on it, and it was very simple construction. The first survey was to identify where the fault lines were in America. The second survey was to go deeper and understand what's behind those fault lines and pushing people along. And the third survey was going to be, okay, how do we fix it? Which is a really nice thing to present and for a foundation to want, and I'm all for it. However, it's just not that easy. If it was, we would have figured out how to bring the country back together again. I'm very proud of myself, but I don't think I can solve the nation's divides that quickly. I think that what we found from doing this is that all the pressures right now in the country, all the pressures are pushing the country apart. right? The media preferences are pushing us apart. What's happening on social media, general tone and the general tone of the country is pushing us apart. And I think the most important thing is with that in mind, we need to stop thinking about solving this problem immediately. Like, I think what we're going through, we're going to go through for a while. We have to think about mitigating it. We have to think of it more as climate change than just a simple policy problem. How do we fix this thing that's happening, or how do we at least try to nibble around the edges? And I think most importantly, try to understand it. And I think that thinking about mitigation, just looking for a silver bullet, I think is the best way to try to deal with what we're going to be dealing with. I'm never accused of being a sunny person. It's a hazard being a journalist and also the work that I do. But I honestly, I honestly think that we're going to be going through this for a while. Trump will go away. He can't run again, right? He's old. But the divisions in the country aren't about Trump. They're there. And I think it's very likely when Trump leaves that the Trump coalition, such as it is, fragments probably along some of the lines we have in this typology, right? I think what the next leader of the GOP, I think the places to vote conservatively in this typology we have, the excerpts, just even like the excerpts and the evangelical hubs, they're both vote conservative. Evangelical hubs are more conservative, but they vote Republican. They never vote Democratic, the excerpts. They want different things. And when Trump is gone, there's going to be a knife fight in the Republican Party about who is in charge and who is the heir. And they're going to see different answers. I honestly think we're going to be going through this, and I'm sure probably if you guys who study this agree, like this is probably something we're going to be dealing with for the next decade or longer. And so the one thing I'd say is buckle up. Don't expect an easy answer, and be ready for a turbulent decade or so. Again, not cheery, I know.
Thanks very much.
And any questions?
So I'm gonna let you take care of this, but if there are people online who have questions, if they type them into the chat, I'll convey their questions to you.
Please do.
Yeah.
I think the typology is pretty compelling, but I'm wondering if your unit of analysis about county is kind of really rough. Well, LA County is 10 million people, and there's counties in Texas with 67 people. And I'm wondering if, and you probably can't really do a survey at a much more narrow, granular level than maybe a county, but have you considered trying to break up, most of the stuff that you're basing your typology on is census data that can probably be broken down to zip code or track.
Yeah, absolutely.
I wonder if you considered that.
Yeah, well, so before we chose counties, we thought about a lot of different things. And I've talked to people who had built similar typologies, including like Claritas, right? You got to see the Claritas typology, which is by zip code, which was done by what's his name out in California. But I talked to him about this before we built this. And he was like, avoid zip codes. He's like, they move all the time. They're not useful. And like, you can't really map. One of the things we're trying to do with this typology and this map is we were trying to create something that was not just for academics. We're trying to make this something that public can consume. I mean, trying to get an editor to accept more than 3 colors on a map is freaking impossible. I'm gonna tell you right now. So this is hard enough. But the other thing I would say is that it's very true. You could go down to the tract level even, right? You could try to go down the census tract level. It's a couple things. It's very hard to pull down to that level. Extremely difficult. They tried some of the stuff. I was at the Journal for like 12 years, the Wall Street Journal, and we toyed with it a little bit. We wanted something that people could understand. And I understand what you're saying about the one thing I'd say that works in our favor on some of the stuff is like what we say about places like LA County and Wayne County and New York, Manhattan is it's cheating. I understand, but we're just saying those places are just really big and complicated, full of lots of different people, and that's what they are. But that's also true, right? And like the people you talk to every day, particularly in a big city, aren't just the people in your census tract, right? I mean, if you live in New York, some people never leave their street, I guess. But like, you get around with people and you meet different kinds of people. For us, it's just a question of what we could do that would be able to sell to people. I can't even get people to take counties sometimes, man. Like they just want to do everything at the state level. And this is hard enough. However, I would say like if somebody wants to give a try at that, I would say definitely go for it.
Another clarifying question. What was the data that you used to do the original k-means clustering?
It's primarily ACS. census ACS data. The religion data we had to get, no, this is that, so we had to get that from originally we got it from the Glen Mary research, religion research, but this last one we actually got from oh gosh, what's the name of it? They did a massive survey of faiths in the country. Jeez, it escapes me. I could give it to you later. And that was how we got. That's how you get we pull the stuff out for evangelicals. We pull the stuff out. I think we do have religious adherence across all these is something we put in as well. But the LDS communities and the evangelical communities we pulled out of there.
New Jersey mustering only once.
No, we did this is the third iteration of this. In fact, we did this last one because RWJF really wanted us to.
In a different year.
Yeah, so yeah, and we talked a little bit about this too. I used to work at Pew, and I worked with Andy Proha.
Yeah.
Who I loved. And Andy's thing was always, whenever we worked on surveys with Andy, it was like, we're going to change this question. We're going to change that question. And Andy was like, no, those have to stay in exactly as they are because we need longitudinal
He's a
data.
trend guy.
Yes, I want longitudinal data. I tend to think, I mean, you could redo this typology, right? You could redo it every 5 years. I'd say 2 things. The country doesn't change as quickly as we think it does. I think people are like, country's always changing. It's like, some parts really don't change very much at all. And the other thing is, I want to be able to track with this over time. I want to do the trend stuff. I want to be able to say, what's happened to the evangelical hubs, like post-Trump, like which direction do they move in? So you can always do it. I hope if they ask me to do it again, we'll do it again. Obviously, it's, you know, the foundation pays the piper. But I would really like to work with this typology for a while and try to watch the communities in it evolve a little bit. There is one thing I will say that is in terms of change. There's one group in here that particularly is really interesting in terms of change, and it's Graying America. In that we noticed, I did a story on this at the Journal actually. We noticed something really interesting post-COVID. In the 2020 census, you know, rural counties don't grow for the most part. Rural counties grow much more slowly than the country as a whole. There was a selection of rural counties that grew faster than the country, which was interesting and surprising to us. And they were these Graying America counties, a selection of them, not all, a selection of them. And the ones that were growing were the ones that were in and around vacation areas. So Leelanau County in Michigan and Door County over in Wisconsin. Yeah, over in Wisconsin. And then obviously Teton County. And like we looked and we did a story on it. Every one that was growing were these places that were kind of resort communities where people who were getting older, either near retirement or in retirement, particularly if you think about the changes that happened with COVID and the ability to work remotely and not having to go to the office all the time. I think the places where people have visited, they wanted to go and just live there. That's one place. I mean, but even that, I don't want to break Graying America apart to study that. What I really would like to do is start pulling out aspects of it and saying there's a selection of Graying America counties that look different than the others. Yeah.
If one was interested in taking a crack at these data, where would they get them?
I'll let you answer that question.
Oh, why, thank you. So Dante's data are somewhat and increasingly will be placed at ICPSR in the Health and Medical Care Archive that RWJF funds.
Yep.
And so we really urge you and your students to come and take a look and maybe bring other data to these data and see what we can do with these typologies.
Yeah, the other thing that would be really interesting, we were talking about this earlier. The one thing that would really be interesting to me too is that so for instance, these communities are full of different types of people, like big cities, right? Big cities are full of all sorts of different kinds of people. The thing that would be really fascinating for me, and we haven't had time to do this yet, or we just don't have time, or people. But like, so for instance, what are the differences between like African American respondents from similar socioeconomic circumstances, but who live in different places? Like, how do they answer these questions? Are the answers different? Are the answers different for somebody, a black male of the age of 50 with a household income of $75,000 in the African American South, and that same age and income cohort in a big city. That kind of stuff's fascinating. And I think we learned more. I think there's a lot to dig into still.
I got a question on that. Have you looked at how variable each of these categories are in terms of attitudes? So, I'm struck with some of these, like, imagine, I was just thinking of like the Black Belt in the South.
Mhm.
Is you might expect a lot of variation in the population. You've got black population, white
Absolutely.
population.
Yeah.
You might have others that are incredibly homogeneous. like
Absolutely.
Military base. It'd be interesting to know.
It's, well, I'll tell you right now, I think it would be a great thing to explore, and that would be in the data, but I'll tell you right now, like the aging farmlands, they are lockstep on most of this stuff. But the African American South, and the other one that's a really good example of that is the Hispanic centers. They're really different because in the Hispanic centers, the Anglo population, the Hispanic population is really different. When you get to the African American South, like some of those communities are so divided, like it's just hard to express. Like we've been to some of those communities, and literally in small towns, there's a black grocery store and a white grocery store. And they could even be like a block from each other, and like literally just a completely different clientele. Like they're divided in almost every possible way. And obviously faith, church, where people go on Sunday.
I mean, so we were talking about how like these communities want different things, but part of the motivation for you behind this project was the idea that people don't realize or don't, they don't break these things up. And so, on the one hand, right, you know that all the sort of paid political consultants are really big into micro targeting and all this sort of stuff, right? But on the other hand, it seems like a lot of times when people talk about politics and winning the day on politics, it's not different.
I know.
Right? It is this thing where this is the issue of the day. And then, people, sort of going through their day for 23 and a half hours. It's like, well, we're all doing these different things. We care about the stuff, whatever. And then, okay, now I'm going to focus on politics. And politics is something different from all these things you're talking about in the community.
Yep.
And so I just sort of wonder, like, let's assume that the typology is correct.
Wow.
You're talking but you're talking to voters. Have you ever talked to sort of consultants in DC, these elite people, and they're like, oh yeah. We know we can't run this sort of ad in Kentucky, so that's why we're not doing it there. Or do they understand these differences?
So to some extent, yes. I don't think they have. I'm sure they have my map on the wall, and they're like, we need to do
Yeah.
I don't think that's happening, but they have their own way of looking at this stuff, and viewing it. And I do think, to some extent, like say the micro targeting, right? Like they're reaching people on this thing, right?
Yeah.
So they do it anywhere. So maybe they're just like, well, we know that there's this collection of 5 people in this one county, and we're going to send them the message, and we're going to ignore the rest of the county. And I completely acknowledge that. I think it's going on probably to some extent. But my answer to that is just like, sure, but they're 5 people. Like the county is the county, right? The people around them feel different.
Oh yeah, I mean, like you're doing a different thing, right? You're trying to tell these sort of stories, but like, and since you don't have to do door to door knocking, you don't have to map out the neighborhood and say, well, this is the. But there is this sort of thing that, like, how do I put this? Like the idea of individuals embedded in communities, which is how you started, and you can sort of get this. It's so hard to do. One, that I can imagine them being like, "We're not going to do this, right? Because it's not worth our time,
Right.
and we can just do the micro targeting thing." But I just sort of wonder if there's something you can pull out in these things that show, and you did show me earlier the sort of thing about like, do I get my information from friends and family versus
You have all those questions,
yeah, but I guess it's that thing of, the thing I said to you earlier about like if I'm lockstep with Trump, that means I either care a lot or I don't care at all, and I'm just parroting my community, right? And if there's something you can notice in these communities where like that's one way they're different in terms of they are actual communities versus you know, in the sort of stereotype of in the big cities, like, well, everyone's on their device and they're actually in their own worlds. And so, as you're saying, it's sort of glossing it over. Well, the big cities are very diverse and these others are not, but maybe they're diverse in that sort of way too. Do they think of themselves as we're together, or alternatively, actually, I'm a atomized person off on my own, right?
Yeah, and I think
Just happen to be surrounded by a million other people.
right. I think actually in big cities, people are actually particularly people in big cities are more likely to think that.
Yeah.
Right. Like everybody's a unique individual.
Yeah.
Even though they're not really
But
sometimes.
you don't have those types of questions here. You don't have like you don't have like or do you? These sort of like personal
Like that's an interesting question. Like how do they? Yeah, we do have some questions like that. We have some questions about we do have some questions about I'll share this data with you. I didn't put them in here, but we do have some questions like I feel there I mostly agree with people in my community. I have a lot in common with people in my community. We do have those questions in here, and they show up a lot stronger in now again, that's their perception.
Sure, yeah.
You see it a lot more. There's a lot more agreement when you get out to the aging farmlands and rural middle America, like those truly rural communities. In the evangelical communities, like there's a lot more like we're all singing on the same hymnal, right?
Yeah.
And I do think in big cities, to look at the data. So I mean, first of all, we talked earlier. I have some spreadsheets I have to send you where you can just go through some stuff. But like, these are good questions. They're good questions, and like we asked a series of questions in 2004. Do you like where you live? Would you move if you could? What do you like about where you live?
Yeah.
We asked some of those questions. They didn't yield as much as we thought they would. Like we might come back to them at some point.
And you don't have do you have like lifestyle questions?
Yeah, you know how we get a lot of lifestyle stuff. This is like a really nice thing I should have put in here. I didn't. That's my fault. MRI Simmons does massive consumer research.
Right. Yeah.
And we have all their data broken into these.
I see. Okay.
So we can talk about actually that's a good point. I didn't even think about that. In terms of what they watch,
Yeah.
like how often they watch CNN, how often they watch Fox News, but then also where they eat, like what stores they go to, like what's their favorite pizza place. We have all that information, which is a whole like, frankly, if I had the money, you know, looking back now at the grant request, if I had the money, would I hire somebody just to do the consumer side of this and like just work through the MRI Simmons data because there's so much in there. I mean, that survey, I don't know if you've ever seen that book. It's like
and it's quite expensive.
well, they give it to free, but they give it to me for free at this level because they're like nobody else can do anything with it. You anyway, so here, throw the ball.
Well, because when you talked about like these places that are so similar but are geographically very distinct, I mean, when you drive through these places, you notice it, but it's
Absolutely.
because of the storefronts and you know, are they more, you know, do they have the soccer fields versus basketball courts versus football fields?
Yeah. So it's a big story like Northern Virginia, the rise of like cricket fields appearing in
the
side of the Indian population.
Well, as I said, when we were in Tallahassee, there was a bunch of us from the north who would play basketball every morning. Everybody else was playing football or cricket, which is sort of an interesting sort of thing.
Yeah. I mean, it's like to me, there's a whole set of also like, and this stuff is not that expensive to buy. And you have people here who scrape. Like store location data is fascinating.
Yeah.
Because in a way you're gonna let the consumer researchers do the work for you. It's like, okay, you tell me. Yeah, it's like show me where all the Cracker Barrels are, and then I'll know something. Like show me where where have you been putting the Starbucks lately? Where have you taken the Starbucks away? Right.
That's
Like there's a lot to learn from the consumer data that again, it's just the advantage of geography is just using geography as a building block is just so powerful because there's so much stuff that's gathered at the geographic level you can measure things against.
Can I ask you a question about the comparability of your data sources? You start out, I think you said with the ACS.
Yeah, for the building of the typology.
Yeah. So that's presumably people 18 and over and their personal characteristics.
Yeah.
The VoteCast data are exit poll data.
Yeah, and entry poll. They do it really weirdly now. Yeah.
But essentially that database is voters.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes, that's right.
So it's a subset of people 18 and over.
Yeah.
I'm not sure. I know in the vote cast data, obviously citizenship is taken into account. I don't know really about the ACS data, whether they include non-citizens, but
Yeah, they do.
yeah.
Yeah.
So tell me how you feel about the difference between the voting population voting age.
Again, like that's something where if we had the time. A lot of people here. This is something that's worth looking into because I think that's fascinating. You
I don't know
could
if that's
use the
true.
discrepancy. Show me what is the where because you have the ACS data that will show you what are the demographics of rural middle America, and then you could have. I mean, obviously, it's not quite the same. It's not quite the size sample. But you could have the vote cast data and say like, this is what the population looks like in rural middle America. This is what the voting population looked like for 2024. Who didn't show up, right? Or compare it over time and say like, this is what it looked like in 2020, 2016, 2020, 2024, or even more important. Well, not more important, but maybe just as interesting would be midterms. Like,
Yeah.
does it more closely approximate the overall population in presidential years and then less so in midterms by some reasons? But like, what's the difference? Right.
Yeah, and I think there's a general observation that it's a kind of a proximity relationship that people feel better about places or individuals who are closer to them.
Yeah.
Than those who are far away.
Yes.
You have a finding like that.
Yeah.
But, people have a lot of a growing distrust of Congress, but they like their own
Your
member.
own congressman, right?
Right.
Can't vote your guy out. He's doing good
And
work.
there are other examples of this.
Right.
So you have a finding that contributes to that in a particular
Yeah.
way.
Yeah. I mean, I do like the idea. It's like, again, like we have more. There are more good stories. There are more good potential stories out there than we have time to do. Like, I honestly think we should do that. Like this year, we should do the midterm. We should do that for the midterms because I know the VoteCast. I know the guy who runs VoteCast at AP really well, and we could talk about if this grant comes through, I'll be embedded there. I'm going to start working at AP a couple days a week just because I miss being in a newsroom. But I would like to, I think that's something really to explore the difference between what the demographics of the community types are versus what the voter demographics are in a particular election.
I mean, it seems to me that focusing on the midterms, has a lot of advantages, a
Yeah.
lot of pluses. But it's like interjecting an anti-incumbent bias.
Yeah. Especially this year, it might be weird.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so I don't know how you balance the.
We just acknowledge that it is what it is, right? I mean, you just have to you put it out there and you explain what the situation is. I mean, like 2026, it's still we're still 10 months away, less now.
Yeah.
Around 10 months. The electorate's going to look different. And the question would be, look, the thing that would be really interesting, we should be able to get this from the VoteCast data too, just generally speaking, and compare them without throwing in the who didn't vote. But like we should get an idea of in each one of these types, because VoteCast is pretty big. It's a pretty big sample of being able to see like what happened in different age groups and different demographics in each one of these types. So for instance, like college age voters are less likely to vote midterms, right? Obviously, it's well-known fact. Does it look different this year? Does it look lower? How does it compare to 2018? Like these are interesting questions in 2022.
I'm gonna ask one more time if there are people online who want to submit a question through the chat. We can take that. I don't know if there are other questions in the room.
I have one, but if there's anybody popping up, I can
No,
defer.
not yet.
So. I have
This is both a methodological suggestion and a substantive one. And I'm going to do it in the way that comparative politics going would do by saying something about a part of the country I know something about. So I'm thinking about my life here in Washtenaw County and my time as a grad student in San Diego County. San Diego is interesting because it's has several college campuses. It's an urban center. Jets would go over our seminars on a daily basis, and we'd have to stop talking because they were coming from one of several military installations there. And so what I'm thinking about at San Diego is it's more of a mixture of your typology than Ann Arbor is.
Yeah.
Which has a greater proportion, I think, of the college town part.
Yeah.
And so like there's some other models that you could employ with the data you have. And if there's more granularity in the ACS data, you could, because I'm thinking like each county is some proportion that sums to one of the 13 types. And that would, if you built a model around that, there are a couple ways I can think of to do this. You could get a sense of the heterogeneity in the county. And you could still take sort of the modal, like whichever has the modal type, you could sort of still do that for like your sampling purposes and that sort of thing. But it might help reconceive this notion that there's probably some contact theory hypotheses that you could think about asking questions around. But it's an alternative way to sort of think about the diversity within the counties.
Yeah. Well, and we have San Diego in here as a big city. It's like a bit of everything. And I will say, like, there are a lot of colleges, like, I mean, Boston has a lot of colleges in it, but it's not a college town here. It's a big city. And I think, honestly, if you're asking me, I think it's a better, even in Boston, I think that's a better name for what Boston is than saying it's a college town. I mean, even New York has a lot of colleges in it. But I do like, I mean, the idea of exploring the differences within the communities is like, I'm all for it. Like, I'm trapped in my lane of heaven to write about these. I mean, the nice thing about coming here and talking to people like you guys is like, have at it. Like, in all seriousness, like, there is no such thing as bad use of taking this. Well, I mean, there is such a bad thing as bad use of this data, but like, not that anybody here would have. Right. I'd love to see people do well with this and take it and run with it.
You can probably just force a structural topic model to do what it does with like textual data with the data you have and get like a quick cut of what I'm suggesting. I'm an IR scholar, so I'm not gonna.
No, but
I will tell other people that.
unleash the students.
Sure.
Okay, I'll call us now to a formal close, but join me in thanking Dante for